Hi everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença and today we're going to talk about problem set 8, cookie jar of CS50 Introduction to Programming with Python. If you would like to participate in our Telegram group and also our group coaching every week, check the description below. Alright, and we would like to emphasize that this video solution is made for those who have already completed the assignment and want to have an alternative view about the problem. We totally discourage plagiarism. Okay? So in this cookie jar project problem, we're gonna work with class. That is the main concept of this week, right? This object-oriented programming, okay? So basically, we're going to implement a cookie jar in which to store cookies. We're gonna use a file jar.py, implement a class called jar with this method. So we're gonna work with each bullet point in here, and we can use this source code that they gave, all right? And then once we finish, we're gonna implement 4 or more functions to test our jar class, okay? So let's start in here. Basically, the first thing that I did was copy and paste in here the source code that they gave, okay? And we're gonna implement each of these steps. So before we start, let's understand how class works. Python is an object-oriented programming language. Almost everything in Python is an object with its properties and method. A class is like an object constructor or a blueprint of creating objects. To create a class, we use the keyword class. Let's suppose we want to create a class of jar to keep track of how many cookies we have on it. So we do class jar, cookies equals to 5, and to print the class, we do print jar. Now, we can use the class name jar to create objects. So in this case, we're going to reuse the same code that we did before, but right now we are working with one specific object, in this case, one_jar. So we do one_jar equals to jar, and then we can print how many cookies doing one_jar.cookies. The examples before are classes and objects in their simplest form, and they are not really useful in real-life applications. To understand the meaning of class, we have to understand the built-in init function. All classes have a function called init, which is always executed when the class is being initiated. Use the init function to assign values to object properties or other operations that are necessary to do when the object is being created. For example, let's create a class called person and use the init function to assign values for name and age. So we make class person, and then we use the init function. In this init function, we have 3 parameters: self, name, and age. Then we do self.name equals to name, self.age equals to age, and now that we have the structure of our class, we can create one object. So in this case, our object has name P1 equals to person, and the name is John, and 36 is the age. Then if we print P1.name, we're gonna see John, and if we print P1.age, we're gonna see 36. So basically now we have a better understanding of class, object, and how to create them. Alright, so I think now we can start working with our code. The first thing that we're gonna implement is exactly the init function like we saw in the animation. Alright, so let's see here the requirement. Init should initialize a cookie jar with the given capacity, which represents the maximum number of cookies that can fit in the cookie jar. If capacity is a not known negative integer, though, init should instead raise a value error. Okay, so we need to check. Here we have 2 things to do in our init. We're gonna check if the user is giving us a capacity that is less than 0. If it's less than 0, we're gonna raise a value error, all right? Otherwise, we're gonna say that we have the capacity like the capacity that we receive, and we have to create the size property that we're gonna see in the future that will count how many cookies we have in the jar, all right? So in here, one thing that is important to see, we have here the word self, okay? So if we take a look here in W3 Schools, that is the best resource for everything about programming basically, we know that the self parameter is a reference to the current instance of the class and is used to access variables that belongs to the class, all right? It does not have to be named self. You can call it whatever you like, but it has to be the first parameter of any function in the class. So basically in here, CS50 is already using the word self, okay? So this self represents the instance in here. So what are we gonna do? First, we need to check if the user is giving us the correct capacity, okay? So we're gonna say if capacity less than 0, this means that we're gonna raise a value error exception. So raise value error, and I'm gonna say here wrong capacity. Okay, just a warning message to the user that he's doing something wrong. And then we're gonna do self.capacity equals to capacity. Okay, actually here I'm gonna use an underscore, and I'm gonna do here self.size equals to size. Actually, this part I will leave to later, okay, because I think it will be better explained when we work with the property. Right now, forget about this, okay? So we are checking if we are receiving the correct number in here, okay? So now let's do the next step. So now the string, the str should return str with n cookies, where n is the number of cookies in the cookie jar. For instance, if there are 3 cookies in the cookie jar, then str should return 3 emojis of the cookie. Okay, so what are we gonna do in here? We're gonna work with this str in this part. So what is this str in Python? This method should be defined in a way that is easy to read and output all the members of the class. So it basically represents the class object as a string. Okay, it will convert the class object as a string. And this is exactly what they're expecting us to do. Okay, so what are we gonna do? Actually, I'm gonna go back in here. We're gonna define capacity. Okay, capacity equals to capacity. And we're gonna define size here equals to 0, because why I'm defining here size equals to 0, because when we start the object, the capacity will be the capacity that the user gave to us, or 12, and the size will be 0 because the user is already initializing the cookie jar. We're not adding any cookies inside. Okay, so this will be exactly what we have in here. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna return, and we're gonna return n times the cookies. What is n in our case? It's how many cookies we have in the cookie jar. All right, so here I'm gonna do self.size. This is how we get the size, times, and since we want to print out a string, we're gonna use this emoji here, so you can copy and paste inside. Okay, so let's test. Let's see if it's working so far. If I'm gonna comment out these lines, otherwise it might give us a problem. Okay, and I'm gonna create here an object. So I'm gonna call jar equals to jar. Okay, and I'm gonna print jar. So if we run here python jar.py, it is not printing anything because right now the size is 0. But let's suppose size is 3. So let's do some changes in here and we run it again. It will print the 3 cookies that we have, all right? So it's working. Since it's working, I'm gonna return here to 0 so we can continue. All right, so far so good. Now let's work with the next part. Let's work with deposit. Deposit should add n cookies to the cookie jar. If adding that many would exceed the cookies jar's capacity, though, deposit should instead raise a value error. So here we have to check if the user, let me remove this comment in here and I'm gonna comment this part. Okay, so if the user try to add, for example, the capacity of our cookie jar is 3. If we try to add 4, we're gonna raise a value error exception, because this means that we're trying to add more cookies than we can. All right, or if the total amount of cookies, for example, we already have 2 cookies and I want to add more 2, if the capacity is 3, we can't have 4 cookies inside as well. All right, so we have to check these 2 things. So what are we gonna do? If n is greater than self.capacity, what we're gonna do, we're gonna raise a value error, and I'm gonna say here exceed capacity. Okay, the other checking we're gonna do is doing this sum with the self size. So if self.size plus n is greater than self.capacity. And remember that size is how many cookies we have inside, okay? Raise value error exceed capacity, okay? Then if everything works fine, if we don't have any problem, we can add the n cookies in our self.capacity. So I'm gonna do self.size, plus equals n. So we're adding, for example, we have no cookies in here. If we're adding 2, we're gonna have 2 cookies. So let's try it out. Here we have jar, and if I do jar.deposit 2, we are supposed to see 2 cookies. Okay, so let's see if we run this again. Now we're seeing 2 cookies, okay? Because in here we have 0, and now we're adding 2, and we're printing 2, all right? Now let's go to the next one. Withdraw should remove n cookies from the cookie jar. If there aren't that many cookies in the cookie jar, though, withdraw should instead raise a value error. So for example, if we have 3 cookies in the cookie jar and we want to remove 4, we can't because we don't have 4 cookies, all right? This is what we're gonna work. So let's work with withdraw. Okay, and what we're gonna do in here, we're gonna do the same checking that we did. So if n is greater than, let me see, if self, that we have to check how many cookies we have, and if we want to remove more cookies than we have, we're gonna raise this error. So if self.size is less than n, so this means that we want to remove more cookies than we have, we're going to raise this value error message. So here can't, I don't know, trying there, or you can say there are less cookies than asked to remove, for example. All right. And if we don't raise this message, we're gonna remove the cookies in here. So cookie size minus equals to n, okay? So it's the other way around of deposit. So if I do here, I deposit 2 and I wanna remove 1, withdraw. In the end, here it should appear 1, right? So let's see if it works. And in the end, it's appearing 1. Okay, so we added 2 cookies and we removed 1, and here we are displaying only 1. Okay, perfect. Now we're almost finishing. Here, capacity should return the cookies jar capacity. So we're gonna work with this property capacity in here. Okay, so let me put here this. And what are we gonna do? Here, this property, this add property, is the property is the Pythonic way to avoid formal getter and setter methods in your code. These functions allow you to turn class attributes into properties or manage attributes. Okay, I know it's a little bit complicated, but if you take a look in the lecture, they talk a lot about property and those things. So basically, this function property will just return the capacity. Okay, so in here we're just gonna return self.capacity. Okay, let's see if it works. I believe it won't. Yes. So what this means? Can't set attribute capacity. So here, to make this available, we're gonna use an underscore before. So what this means? Here we're gonna use an underscore, and the capacity will be get by this property here. So we're using underscore. Okay, and now it is supposed to work. So let's see, and here it's working again. Just put a underscore before, and this size should return the number of cookies actually in the cookie jar. So we're gonna do the same thing as we did for the capacity. Okay, we're just gonna return the size, and remember to use the underscore before size. Okay, and one thing that is extremely important is that, let me change in here, and where is it? All the times we wanna update the value of size, we have to use the underscore. Okay, so let's test now if it's working, and it is still working. One thing that is extremely necessary is that in CS50, in check 50, they are expecting to receive the word self.size. So don't try to rename, otherwise you might spend a lot of time in this problem. I had this issue until I realized that I had to use the word size. Okay, so use the word size and capacity. Well, so everything seems working fine. All right, now let's work with testing this code. Okay, and to test, let's understand how we can test things in Python. For example, we have a variable x equals to hello. If we want to check, we do x equals to hello, assert x equals goodbye. The assert keyword lets you test if a condition in your code returns true. If not, the program will raise an assert error. In this case, the assert will raise an assert error because hello is not equals to goodbye. Thinking about another example where we want to check if our function is working. Let's suppose we have the file above. Def main, this is our main function, and we're printing 2 square is, and we're calling the function square, passing the parameter 2. Then we are defining our square function and our parameter is n, and we're doing return n times n. If we want to test the square function, we can run the test underscore calculator.py, where we do from calculator import square, then we define our main function calling the function test square, and then we define our test square function doing assert square 2 is equals to 4. In this test, the assert keyword will return true because the square of 2 is 4. This means that our function is working the way that it's supposed to. If we change the function with square by returning only n instead of n times n, once we run the test, the assert keyword will raise an assert error because our function is telling us that square of 2 is true, but it should be 4. This means that there is something wrong with the square function. So now we're gonna test our code, alright? So basically, if you take a look here in hints, CS50 already gave to us a pseudocode that we're gonna use, not a pseudocode, a source code, okay? And I already paste in here. So basically, the test str they already made, okay? Now we just need to test the init function, the deposit, and the withdraw. And like we saw in the animation, they are using the assert keyword, so we're gonna use again in our case, okay? So for the test init, I wanna do 2 testing here. So I wanna test if we put here without any capacity when we are initializing our class, and this should return us 12. And if I pass a capacity like number 3, it should return us 3, okay? So in here, I'm gonna do jar equals to jar. We're creating the object. And here I'm not passing any capacity. And the assert should be, for the assert for jar.capacity should be equals to 12. Okay, so the property capacity should be equals to 12. Then I'm gonna create another object, jar2, and here I'm gonna pass the number 3. And if we do jar.capacity, this should give us number 3. All right. Now let's work with the deposit. So the deposit, we're gonna add cookies and check if the adding cookies we are receiving the correct size of our jar. All right, so I'm gonna create here an object called jar, and I'm gonna do a jar.deposit, for example, number 6. If we do an assert to jar.size, okay, this should return us the number 6 because we're adding 6 cookies, all right? And if we do here jar.deposit 3, the assert should return us a jar size of 6 plus 3, that it's 9, okay? So far so good. Here it's double equals, I'm so sorry. And we can do the same thing with withdraw. So I'm gonna use the deposit in here, okay? Actually, I'm gonna use these first 2 lines of deposit, okay? And then we're gonna do this withdraw. So jar.withdraw, and if I remove 3, the assert should be 6 minus 3, that it's 3. So assert jar.size should be equals to 3. And if I remove again, for example, 1, the assert jar.size should be equals to 2, okay? Let's see if our test is running fine. So py test underscore jar.py, and we're not passing the tests. let's see then. What is going on? Here is saying jar capacity. It is complaining about the first test. Let me see. What is our first test? I'm saying jar. Oh, here, this is the problem. We create the jar true, but I'm using the first jar. So if I put here jar true, now I believe we pass. So let's run again. And now we're passing everything, all right? This is it. Now let's do check 50 and see if we got all green. So like we can see here, we got all green, so this means that we are correct, alright? Well, if you enjoyed this content, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, send here on the comment or enter in our Telegram group, alright? The link is in the description. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!